Good afternoon. Welcome to this session. During this panel, you will learn how to become a professional Fortnite player, and then you come back to your kids and challenge them. It's a joke, but behind the joke, there's the evidence of a generation of journalists, media people, managers, decision makers, including me, who are not familiar with Fortnite and who are hardly familiar with our children's approach to technology and information and education and social and human relationships. And if we want to grow a generation of well-informed citizens and media consumers, we need to change our approach with these people. I give you just one example. A recent study conducted at Texas Tech University found out that one of the most important drivers for the rise of flat earth theory is YouTube, and in particular, its video recommendation algorithm. I don't know how many of you have children. I have 2 kids. And I can say from my personal and daily experience that YouTube is their favorite TV channel. I said TV channel and not online sharing video platform because that's the way they use and like television. You don't even need to browse it. There's an icon on the screen of the television ready for you. Then you can choose your favorite channels or search for YouTubers, cartoons, music. It's the same experience you can have on your smartphone, but you have it on television. What does it mean? It means that my children, our children, are easily exposed to misleading content, such as flat earth theories or other stuff they may find interesting and curious, but very different from what they are studying at school. I don't blame them. I'm not talking about children with psychological disease, addiction, or something like this. But I think that we need a different and new approach to their education, taking into account that they are born digital and they have to deal with misinformation, which is not an internet or social media related problem, but easier to stay in the digital environment like it was before. This is the reason why I asked to Julian, Jochen, and Laura to join this session, because I think that from different point of views, they can tackle the issue, share their experience, and try to give some tips for the solutions. So I'm happy to leave the stage to them, and Julian will start. She will briefly tell us what is lie detectors and why she decided to put her efforts and energy in this project.
Thank you very much. Is this working? Can you hear me?
I think so.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Oh, is that working now? There we go. How's that? Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for coming on a beautiful, sunny Saturday afternoon. And thank you for Andrea for putting this panel together. I've been asked to say a few words, first of all, about what we do and specifically what we've been doing in the last year, because I was here last year, maybe probably none of you were there at the time, but I'm going to try not to repeat myself. And then very specifically, I want to talk about what we've learned, because what we do is we work with children aged 10 to 15. We're a journalist-led project called Lie Detectors, and we're learning ourselves all the time from the children, because disinformation, fake news, whatever you want to call it, is not a static issue. It's one that is developing very quickly, and in order to be able to address it as journalists and as other interested people, we really need to be keeping on top of what's happening. So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about that, also about how we work with the journalists and schools and various political stakeholders as well. So Lie Detectors, very briefly, I'll tell you, it's an independent non-profit. We're based in Brussels. We have offices in Berlin and Vienna. We are active in 3 countries at the moment, but our idea is to work with journalists, sending them very actively into schools, and Jochen is going to speak about that later on, because Jochen actually goes into schools, as does another member of the audience over there. And we send journalists into schools to talk to children aged 10 to 15 about disinformation. So I'm going to, I don't need to tell you what's wrong, what the problem is that needs fixing. I think we've been talking about that a lot over the last 3 or 4 days. The problem of, we believe that as important as fact-checking is, and as important as AI is, all of these things that we've been talking about in these very, very interesting panels, they are never going to be able to root out everything, because as we speak, disinformation is going underground, it's being perpetuated in the kind of fora that are beyond the content managers that we're talking about. They are beyond the fact checkers. We're talking about YouTube videos, we're talking about WhatsApp, we're talking about the kind of digital living room that's been very much in the discussion. It's away from the eyes of the adults, away from the eyes of the fact checkers. So our idea is we need to actually educate the consumer, and who better to do that than journalists? We need to take a role in this. We can't just wait for someone else to do it. We are by default fact checkers, and we have a role in actually explaining what we do at a time when the trust in our profession is being eroded very quickly. Specifically, what we do is we select and we train journalists with a script that's been evaluated by psychologists, by children, by teachers, because you can do a lot wrong, actually, when you talk about this. We don't want to make people afraid. And then we send them very specifically into classrooms to talk to children about 2 things. Number 1, fake news. What it is, why it's there, why should we care, and what can we do about it. But the second thing that we talk to them about, and this is why we work with journalists and not just with coaches who'd be perfectly capable of doing the first part, the reason why we work with journalists is because we really want to encourage journalists to step away from behind their screens, come out and talk about how journalism actually works, and also talk about how this very high quality standard that we have and that we try to get to every day isn't always possible to fulfill, how we make mistakes, how we write an incomplete story, how we write sometimes a biased story because we're writing for a particular audience, and we do that with interactive games. And the whole point of that is we're trying to make children and teachers, it's very important, the teachers are an unofficial audience, understand that on the one hand there is purposeful misinformation being put out there with the intention of manipulating and distorting the truth, but on the other hand there is journalism that might not always get it right, but that there's a big difference in that it inherently has the intention of actually informing. So at the time, we're now in 3 countries. We've been around only for 2 years, but we've actually been advising, because we get so much grassroots indication of where the digital world and consumption is at among the children. We've been advising the European Commission as a member of the high-level expert group on fake news and various governments. And I'll just show you a little bit about what we've done in the last year. Let's see if this works. I hope it does. It's just this is actually something that we sent to our journalists and teachers and everything at the end of last year. So we've done a few things since then. This is just to give you a bit of an idea of what we've been doing. All right. Thank you. I'll just say a couple more things, if that's okay. So that's what we've done. The effect from the kids is really electric. They love it. The journalists are often very afraid, as Jochen might tell you, on the first classroom visit, because it's not always easy. And the teachers, even the ones that initially say, thank God you're here, I'm just going to have a coffee and sit in the back, and please ignore me, come up and then ask for more material. And that's what makes this really important, because what we're trying to do is we're really trying to start something. The journalists go into the classrooms for only 90 minutes, but what we try to do is really put question marks into the heads of the teachers and the children and let the conversation carry on beyond that. Do I have time to talk a little bit about what we've learned, the things that have, more minutes?
Maybe we can talk about it after the...
Okay, because there's some really important things that have changed in the last 2 years. I'll talk about that later.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. If we want to establish good relationship with new generation based on new media literacy, we need collaboration from the media ecosystem. And we need to involve not only young and smart people who are certainly familiar with technologies, languages, and challenges of the digital environment, but they are not always involved in the decision-making process. We need old school people, managers, journalists, media people, tech people, researchers, able to put their experience and skill into this kind of project, but ready to start a new way of relationship with younger audiences. And that's the reason why I asked Jochen to be here, to hear from him how to do it from the voice of media people, of media tech people, and I would like to know from him his personal experience with this adventure.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. This is going to be a rather personal account. So, yeah, from me personally, from experiences and so on. But let me give you sort of first an idea about who I am. I work for Deutsche Welle. Deutsche Welle is Germany's international public service broadcaster, so that's my main job. And it's important also for the context. And in its job, I'm doing a lot of work in the sphere of verification, fact-checking, developing tools, software, dealing with journalism in newsrooms, and so on and so forth. So that's my main job. Then, very important to understand my story, I've got children. I don't know, probably lots of you have children too. Some will probably have, or hopefully, maybe have children in the future. And I can tell you, it's sometimes quite hard, but it's a lovely thing to have. So, of course, you want the best for your children, as most parents do. And the same goes for me. I have 2 boys, and they are now 15 and 18. And, of course, I've been observing them, what they are doing, what they have been doing, and especially with regards to media usage, and so on and so forth. For example, whenever I get a new gadget, like a new phone or a computer or whatever, I don't even try now to get the gadgets started myself. I just hand them over because they're much more intuitive. They know really quickly how to set up a phone, even though they both have Android phones. They're faster than setting up my iPhone than I am. But what they do not know, what I've noticed, was that they do not really, or they did not really, especially when they were younger, they did not understand the underlying concepts. They did not understand things like business models, how money was made, and so on and so forth. So this was sort of a dilemma I found. So I thought, I have to do something. So what did I do? I read. I consulted experts. I went to sort of parent groups and other things like that. So I thought, it's good, so I know a lot now, but how to sort of really change something or make an impact. So I thought, okay, I have to spread this knowledge, I have to share this knowledge, and I thought, okay, I start, well, somebody would start at the school where my children went. So then I sort of got teachers and the headmaster interested, and I can tell you it was an extremely laborious process, because just getting a room outside school hours in a Berlin or German school is not an easy task. So I had to bribe the Hausmeister, sort of the what's the Hausmeister in German, in English, the sort of caretaker. I had to bribe the caretaker with a crate of beer, so he would open the one room and be there, and insurance matters were really difficult. I finally got it going, so it was like a session I did for both parents and children, and the session lasted about an hour and a half, but the preparation took in total maybe, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 hours or more. So not ideal, especially if you've got a job, quite a challenge to fit things like that in. And that was only once. And I thought, okay, I've reached maybe, I think about 100 or so kids and parents came, but a one-off thing, so not ideal. Then later, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I spoke again in my capacity as somebody working for Deutsche Welle at a conference in Leipzig. And there I saw Juliane, and she presented the concept at this venue, or at this event. I thought, brilliant, that's just exactly what I was looking for. So I then talked to her, and it just so happened that we were on the same train going back to Berlin, so we started talking and sort of have stayed in touch ever since. And then I sort of became part of the family, or the group lie detectors. And what is really so useful for me is that I do not have to, when I go into classrooms now, I do not have to take care of any of the logistics. So all I have to do is really, of course, prepare, but then go into classrooms, do my session, and then I just go on and do my main job. And what I normally do is I try to schedule this in the morning, like 8 o'clock, first 2 hours. So I get there at 7:30, sort of to do last-minute fixes, make sure the technology works, start the class at 8, and out or finish by 9:30, and then go to my main job. So this allows me to combine doing something worthwhile, plus with my job, which is also, of course, worthwhile. And I can tell you, it is extremely rewarding. And like Juliane said at the beginning, I can also tell you, I was shit nervous the first time I sat and stood in front of a class. It was a similar situation like that, like this one here. Like I was in front of a group, but this lot were 10 and 11-year-old. And I've spoken a lot in front of adults like yourselves, but I've hardly ever spoken in front of a group of 10 to 11-year-olds. And I can really tell you, I was very nervous. I also admitted that. I told them, boys and girls, you won't believe it, but I'm extremely nervous, and I have no idea what to expect here. But they're fine. I mean, there's no better audience you could wish for than a group of kids that are eager to learn, that are also keen to have something different from their daily routine as a school child, because there is this strange person who's doing something with media, coming into their class and breaking up their routine. And so far, from my experience, they're extremely grateful and knowledgeable or eager to learn things. Of course, there's sometimes situations where you're really struggling. I mean, you're children. Often you have the odd one who tries to sort of disrupt whatever he or she can disrupt. But overall, like I say, it is extremely rewarding. And some of the learning so far is that kids, in order to understand kids, I find you can read a hell of a lot, but talking with them, exchanging yourselves with them is something, again, slightly different. So learning from them what it means to use media, what media they use, what platforms they're on, how they use them, is extremely enlightening. And also the questions they have in that context. Everything has, for me, been extremely helpful and useful to understand children better and their needs, their requirements, their worries, their concerns. And it's also of great benefit, and that wasn't on my mind before, for teachers. Because not only do teachers learn about the topics that we're bringing over, that we're trying to bring across, they're also learning to understand their kids better. So many times I've had teachers tell me, oh, this was really helpful. I didn't know my children were using whatever platform X, or were worried that YouTube was going to be taken down. For example, that was the main concern children had. That they all thought YouTube was going to close and it was going to be the end of the world. And that really also helped the teachers to get a better understanding of the things that their children, their own school kids, are concerned about, that they're doing with how they get information, and how easy sometimes it is to mislead them. So overall, this is just like some experience that I wanted to share, and of course I think we can pick up on more in the course of the discussion that follows.
Okay, thank you. So now let me introduce to you the dark side of the force. No. Facebook. To say the truth, Facebook is a place where children could not stay because you have to be 14 or 15 according to GDPR. But Facebook is the place where their parents are, where their teachers are, and is a crucial player in the digital media and information landscape. And when we come to these information issues, you at Facebook have to face a lot of problems and a kind of bad reputation, deserved or not. But the huge number of people and the amount of content shared inside the platform make you a big player when we come to media literacy and education. And I know that you are making various efforts to tackle this problem. So this is the reason why I asked Laura to be here and listen from her words which kind of efforts you are doing to hold your platform accountable and help new generation to grow well informed.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start with maybe debunking a fake news, which is saying that Facebook benefits from fake news. I think now everyone agrees on the fact that, I mean, people come to Facebook to share and access relevant information, so it is our goal and our interest, also our business interest, to make sure that people see information that is not only relevant to them, but that is also good, professional, and as much true as possible. And I think we will go back to this concept of truth during the whole conversation, as it has been the focus of many panels, I think, in Perugia in general. So our approach to fight against misinformation is based on 3 main pillars. So remove misinformation that is violating our policies or violating local laws, reduce the spread of the other kind of misinformation, and finally inform and raise awareness and make sure that people are actually using their critical sense. And I think this is what we're discussing today, and I will focus a little bit more on that because I think it's actually a very important part of our strategy. So I would just like to focus for 1 minute on the first pillar, because I think it's very important to understand why we make this distinction between removing and reducing the spread. So there are many different kinds of misinformation. And when you think about misinformation that is illegal, such as defamation in Italy, defamation is contrary to Italian law, and it is very often linked to misinformation. Or in other cases, misinformation is very much linked with hate speech, for example. These cases, I would say, are almost easy from the point of view that they're violating our policies, violating local laws, and so in that case, we are removing the contents from our platform as soon as we identify them. At the same time, we know that very often people who spread misinformation do not want to be recognized as the ones spreading misinformation because they do it for political reasons or for economic reasons. And so we fight against those people that are hiding behind fake identities while doing this. So we have been talking a lot about all the efforts that we're doing to take down fake profiles from this platform. We have gotten to a place now where, thanks to artificial intelligence, we're taking down 1 million fake profiles per day at a global level. And so this is definitely an important effort. So that's for the removal part. But then let's think about all the rest of the false news, which is either completely false or partly false. But that is not necessarily illegal. And this is a conversation that I work in public policy, so I very often interact with policymakers, authorities, etc. And at the beginning, when this whole conversation started at the end of 2016, people used to think about fake news and saying Facebook and other platforms should take down misinformation. And then at some point, they realized that nobody probably should be this authority of truth. Like, since the beginning of times, no authority has actually decided that what was not true was not necessarily illegal. And so it is important to make that distinction. And so we do not want to be the ones who decide that a content that is not true, or that is only partly true, or that we don't even are able to verify whether it's true or not, should be taken down from our platform. On the other hand, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing anything. So we should be reducing the reach of such kind of information, especially if it is identified as partly untrue by professional bodies such as fact checkers. So if I think about the second pillar of our activities, it is based on collaboration with experts, with journalists, with fact checkers. And the idea there is that when a user or when artificial intelligence helps us identify contents that could be potentially true, we send them to fact checkers, and we have partnerships all over Europe with local fact checkers. They make their own analysis of the piece of news, of the image, of the video that we sent them, and then they're going to produce a short article analyzing this, and we are going to make sure that this article is shown underneath the content itself. And on the other hand, we're going to reduce the visibility of this content by 80%, which means that it's almost disappearing from our platform, because reducing visibility from 80% is really, really reducing a lot the possibility that people are actually going to see it. But if they do see it, and there I go to the third pillar, which is the most relevant, I think, for the discussion today, they're going to see, first of all, that there is a related article underneath the content and that is something unexpected. So they're going to see a content with something underneath. So they're going to say, well, there is something wrong with this content, which is the first thing that we want to obtain. We want to wake them up. We want them to realize that maybe there's something wrong with this content. Second thing is that when they try to share it, they're going to get to a message that is not going to prevent them from sharing it, but that is going to tell them, well, this content has been analyzed by XYZ fact checker, and so maybe you want to check the analysis of the fact checker. So there, we're getting to a place where we're trying to make sure that people use their critical sense, and I think this is part of the effort of what my colleagues were talking about before, when they see a potential fake news on our platform. And I'm almost over, I know I'm almost out of time, but the other thing that I wanted to say concerning this third big pillar of inform and raise awareness and make sure that people use their critical sense is, well, two things actually. First of all, we want to make sure that there's more transparency for people of why and what kind of content they're seeing on the platform. So we just announced that we are going to making available this service that is called Why Am I Seeing This, also for organic content. It's going to be available in Italy by mid-May as well. And what happens there is that when I see a content on newsfeed, I can click on this little option that will show me why I'm actually seeing this content, simply because I put like on the page that is showing this content, because some of my friends are interacting with it, because based on my activities on the platform I have shown that I'm potentially interested in this content. On the other hand, we're also making sure that people can have more information about the publisher that is publishing this content. So And finally, we're organizing also campaigns on the platform to raise awareness among people in general that they should be thinking before believing everything that they see on the platform. And so providing some basic tips, because sometimes misinformation is just true information, but that was published 2 years ago, but that people are spreading with the wrong date, and so it becomes fake, or that has a title that is super attractive, super interesting. So making sure that you are aware of these signals. And so by being more transparent and by using our platform to communicate to people, to our users, how they should be careful about how they see and how they interpret what they read on our platform, I think we're trying to do as much as we can to make sure that people go back and get control over their own perception of what is true and what is not true, while continuing to work on the two first pillars, which are extremely important as well.
Thank you. Julian, coming back to you. Briefly, if you can talk about the future of your project, and if you could give an advice to newsrooms, what would you suggest? To build new products dedicated to children, to train journalists, what they can do?
Okay, so obviously we think that what we're doing is right and that more journalists should get involved. But I think also that there are a few things that we've learned in the last year, 2 years, where things have changed. So first of all, we've learned that at the beginning we're very much going out and raising the alarm bells. Careful kids, it's not all true what you see online, right? And what we've really noticed now that rather than just raising awareness and making people aware of the dangers and risks online, we really have to, as a journalist, it's so hard to understand this, we have to make it relevant to the children to care whether something is true or not. We have to actually reinstill not just trust in journalism, but actually reinstill trust in facts and actually a value attached to facts, because we're getting to something where, especially the adolescents, sometimes say, well, you know, it's all fake anyway and I don't care, and so I will just make up my own mind, which in a way is even worse if they stop believing anything. So we work very hard at making it relevant. We work very hard at making sure that there are tools available, and those tools, you know, that they are aware it's actually not that difficult. And also that, and this is something that newsrooms, I think when you say, what should newsrooms do? I think the Anglosphere is miles ahead on this. In that the Anglosphere of fact checkers and, you know, the kind of websites that look into things actually take the time to verify even the most mundane stories. You know, the man who married the cobra. Did he really marry the cobra? In Germany, this fake story circulated and has never been corrected. If you actually take the time to correct little weird, fun stories, you can talk to kids about this without it immediately becoming a political discussion. We need to talk to the young audiences about this. They are going to be voters very soon. They are politicized very early on, and they need to have the kind of examples to work with that don't immediately turn them off. You know, it needs to be light, there need to be games. The more games that a newsroom can invent and hand on to the teachers, the better. We also have to remember, and I was just talking to another journalist who also goes to schools with us, sitting over there, Willie, today, who is talking about the decline in text literacy among children, and we cannot ignore that. We've been sitting here, all of us have been to brilliant panels. It's so much about text. It's so much about check the headline, check the spelling, is this right, is that right? You know, you'll have Willie tell you that the kids don't pick up on these things because they actually are getting their information more and more via picture, photos, pictures, and video. And therefore we can't just go against that, we have to go with it. We have to actually really embrace it. We're thinking about that now. What do we do about that? And finally, for teachers, we've got to make this accessible. Teachers are really scared of this subject. They're not on Snapchat or WhatsApp or TikTok. You know, maybe if you're lucky they're on Facebook, but none of the kids are on Facebook. You know, we need to make it accessible. We need to make it super easy for them to use. We need to make it relevant for their teaching as well, and make it available, so widely available that they know that they can pick from any number of brilliant games and quizzes that will even allow them to have their little coffee break. And finally, what teachers also care about more and more is the independent, like they ask us, who's funding you? And I have to say, with due respect to my colleague on this panel, they're relieved when we say that we don't take money from governments, we don't take money from the platforms either, because they're concerned that that the journalists who come in should be really pure journalists that are unimpeded by any partisan or corporate interest that might fetter them. So that's really what we've learned. The digital divide is growing between the teachers and the kids, and it's one that we really have to address because no one's getting to them. And for now, until source literacy and news literacy is a part of all teacher training curricula everywhere, until then somebody's got to jump in, and who better to do it than journalists?
Thank you. In 2 minutes, Jochen, do you think from your personal point of view, how is technology important for tackling misinformation, and do we need specific tools designed for children in this field and fight?
I mean, generally, yes, technology is very important, but only to support. So this is not from the journalistic perspective. So there's lots of valuable tools out there that they can support you in the verification of digital content, for example. Second question, do we need to design something for children? Yes and no. There are already tools out there that are fairly easy to operate. If you think, for example, of a reverse image search on Google, that is not really rocket science, and kids can operate that fairly easily. I've also come across many, many dozens of journalists who have never heard of that, which is scary. But kids sometimes know a lot more than professional journalists. It's also one of the learnings. So Google reverse image search is something that can be taught. But there could also, of course, as always, there could also be more. What is also important, and that's also partly picking up on what Juliana was said, we shouldn't just go in and do lots of talking and preaching only. And that's what I've noticed with the kids, working directly with the kids. Of course, I could go in there and I could do a 1.5-hour lecture on how a newsroom works. And I can assure you that at the latest, after 45 minutes, they're either gone to sleep or they're throwing paper balls at each other. So you have to really involve them. So for example, Juliana said it, this script, this 1.5-hour schedule that we're doing was developed with experts who are very knowledgeable in this field. And it involves, for example, games, playful elements. And one of the games we play, or I play when I go into classes, is just briefly describing that. I divide the class into 2 groups. One group goes out into the corridor, into the hall, and the other group just goes to the window. Then they have 3 or 4 minutes, and their task is to describe what you're seeing. And then they come back together into the classroom, and either then I get at the board, or one of the kids goes onto the board and collecting the information they've seen. So whatever, they describe what they've seen, and then they're just given the job of being a junior journalist, and they have to write a story, or sometimes, depending on the dynamics, I then put together a story. And then they very quickly notice that A, everybody sees the world in different, or with different eyes, and B, something is always forgotten. I was just having a quick conversation with Laura, and when I was explaining that to her just a minute ago, so for example, the kids that would just go out onto the plaza or just look here from the balcony, they would describe probably the buildings and the fountain and the queue that was there, but likely that nobody would mention that it's a sunny day. So now, when you create a piece of, or a news piece, or when I'm just the sort of editor, so I say, why didn't anybody tell me about the sunny weather? Did you lie to me? Did you forget that? And then they suddenly realize, yes, I didn't, or nobody mentioned that. And then they see and they understand what journalism is and how journalism works, that not everybody is seeing the world with the same eyes, and sometimes things are left out, and then when you have to produce something, there's time pressure, there's space pressure, whatever. So they experience that firsthand, and I think that makes a really big difference to just being told. And again, just coming back to why journalists are doing that, it's different to a teacher telling them such stories to somebody who's doing that in their daily business. So I think that also works, and that's sort of these exotic people who come in there. So that's also how it works. So I know it's a long-winded answer to your question. So technology can support and all that, but ideally you involve the kids and let them experience it themselves, and just instead of just sort of standing there and just preaching to them for hours and hours without end.
Thank you. Laura, I'm curious about one thing. Are you involved in education program, or are you planning to be involved? And the second question, if you can imagine a post-Facebook generation, a post-Facebook world for our children.
So on the first question, digital literacy is actually another big priority for us, because of course we have to, and we can be as good as we want in terms of establishing tools and procedures to take down violating contents, but the first and foremost is to make sure that people know how to use our platform in a responsible and safe way. And I would say that this kind of digital literacy activities that we carry out everywhere in Italy and other countries through even physical hubs, like we have a physical hub in Rome at the Termini station where we actually do these things with partners in person, so we do these trainings in person. But the important thing there is to provide people with the right tools to use these technologies in a safe way, but also to understand how they work. And for example, one of the things that we always say when we talk about safety, which is actually also related to fake news, etc., is you should never think about Facebook or Instagram or anything else as if it were a virtual space. It's actually a real space, and if you insult someone, or if you share fake news on Facebook, or if you do anything on Facebook, it's going to have real world consequences. And this is something that is important also in terms of narrative that we focus very much on. And we go around, like we use our tools to communicate with teenagers and with users, adult users, about all these topics, but we also go around schools and we work with partners to make sure that these messages actually get to them. On the second question, I would say that very recently Mark Zuckerberg did many posts recently, one about regulation, which was, I think, very interesting. Another one about how he saw the future of all our platforms and our tools, and what he sees is more interoperability between the various ways of communicating online. So platforms such as Facebook should be linked more with a platform such as Instagram, but there are many others out there, of course, so focusing more on photos, on picture communicating, which of course is more relevant, especially for teenagers today. And then private messaging is something that we are seeing that people are looking for more and more. And there, we are already working, for example, WhatsApp is working very actively to fight against misinformation, because it's coming there as well, right? And so in there, the way you fight against it, since it's not so much about removing content because you're in a one-to-one communication, but it's even more about making sure that people realize, for example, that the content that they're seeing, the message that they have received, has been forwarded to them. And so if it's been forwarded, probably it's part of a mass communication, and probably it could be fake news. So those things, again, are very much focused and based on awareness raising, and I think it's going to grow more and more. The more we move to one-to-one communication, the more we're going to have to work all together on awareness.
Thank you. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Over there.
Over here.
There.
Thank you. John Crowley, a question for Angelo. I'm a little bit concerned by your characterizations of what you describe as partly false. I mean, I can look out into the square and look up into the sky and say the sky's color is turquoise. Strictly speaking, it isn't. It's sky blue, but turquoise is part of the blue color family. I guess I'm being partly false. Yeah. So can you explain what partly false means in an article? Because, you know, it's completely and utterly subjective.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And that's actually one of the issues, is actually defining what is false, what is partly false. So indeed, what we're trying to do is that if we find, also through fact checkers, but also probably, and we're looking at other ways, and we will be working on alternative ways in which we can differentiate maybe the news that are partly false because they correspond, for example, to a statement made by, let's say, a policymaker. Well, a policymaker makes a statement about something that is a topic that can be, I don't know, related to environment or health, that on which there are different opinions about. And some people are going to say that what he said is false, and some other people are going to say that what he said is true. I mean, there are many topics that are divisive between many different people. In that case, we want to make sure that there is a fact checker or there is a professional journalist that actually analyzes the contents and provides an analysis that is going to show why it could be false, why it could not be false. And in that case specifically, we want to make sure that this content is not taken down from our platform. There are other cases, and we're looking at other solutions there, which maybe we will be announcing soon, where people say that the sky is not blue or the earth is not round. In that case, it's clearly false. And so on this, maybe we can do something more. But again, the issue there is that if it's not illegal, why should we, or even a government, be deciding that this content should not be there? I mean, the difference between what is true and what is not true has been there forever, and I don't think a policymaker ever decided that what is untrue is illegal. Not always.
I just think using the phrase partly false is not the right language to describe it. I think you can have a debate about what you think is true, whether it's global warming or not. I just wouldn't use the phrase.
You're right.
Partly false there.
I'll use another one. No, but you're right.
And the world definitely isn't flat. That's not partly false.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can say something about that. Can I say something really briefly? That's a really good question. And what we actually try to also transmit to the kids is that you cannot check every single fact, because do you know how exhausted you'll be, and you just won't bother in the end, So what we try to transmit is and neither is fake news going anywhere, right? The political and the economic benefits are way too interesting for it to go away, right? What we can do is we can kind of take away the thorn, take the sting out of it, and let the kids know, yeah, sure, read some ridiculous story about alien landings if you want to, as long as you know that you're consuming tabloid material. We've always had tabloids, so what? But when it comes to what we try and guide kids, some of the stuff you can just let it go. But when it comes to an important decision, take your time, look around, just wait before you before you make up your mind about whether the sky is turquoise or whether the climate is changing,
And if I may add to that as well, the aim really is to make or to turn the kids into critical thinkers. So if somebody says the sky is whatever color, I mean, the sky, you can argue whether that's important, but if it's a matter of any importance, that ideally they would reflect about it and maybe even check it. And there's various ways of checking something. They could, journalistic principles, they could check with the source. So contact the person who claimed that the sky was blue or turquoise or whatever. You could tell them that it's no bad idea to ask somebody else, adults, teachers, third parties. So that's the journalism principle of second principle, second source, or whatever. And for those who are more advanced, especially the older ones, you could tell them that there's fantastic tools out there that are not difficult to operate. In this case, Wolfram Alpha, which is like a really super duper search engine where you could put in the date and the time of any place in the world, and then it would tell you, amongst many other things, what the weather was like on that particular day. So it would tell you, last year in Perugia, for example, on the first day of the journalism festival, it was raining all day. So if somebody's claiming that it was a sunny day, you could find that out very quickly. So these are all sort of advice we give, and depending on the level of the child, they can then use it. But the main thing is that this moment of reflection takes place. So instead of, I just did a tweet, for example, just before we came in, which was a bit nasty, it was misleading, it was not wrong, but it was also not right. I wrote something like, I've got it here, and John quickly debunked it. I wrote, join us for our session, Talking Media Literacy, How to Reach Young People, and more, starting at 5 p.m. at IJF. And then there's a photo of it with a queue, and then I wrote, these folks are queuing already. So I wasn't lying. It's all true. We were starting at 5 o'clock, and I was asking everybody to join, and I said that lots of people are queuing already. They weren't queuing for our session, they were queuing for one, they were next door. So of course you could believe that quickly. So somebody might just quickly, retweet, reshare, or whatever. Yeah. But this moment of reflection to think, hey, that is something we want to achieve. And if we achieve that, I think that's already a little step, but an important step.
Good example. Another question?
Hi everyone, buonasera a tutti. I'm a student from Rome, and I think that disinformation is not something new. It is born on newspaper and on TV, at least here in Italy. The phenomenon of the fake news started after Brexit results, Trump's victory, and referendum costituzionale in Italy in 2016. when people voted in ways that powerful people didn't want. I personally hate Trump, but that's not the point, I think. Here, I don't have to use my smartphone to be misinformed. It is sufficient to turn on the TV or to read the newspaper, excluding only some of them. What can we expect from media that are controlled by people with interest in other fields or interest conflict? News reports lie to us sincere and try to add news instead of giving them to the people. On the web, we can find both real and false news and fake news, but I personally think that a fake news read on the first page of a famous newspaper is 1,000 times more dangerous than one written by the first creating on Facebook or on a blog.
Which is the question?
The web gave us the instruments to verify something and more voices to have a confront. I will not give Italian examples because here probably only few people would understand them because of the provenance. The establishment decided to invent, together with fake news, also Russia's influence on elections. On March 22nd, the special prosecutor Mueller established that Russia didn't do anything to influence USA elections. And at least here in Italy, almost anyone said that. This is very different from everyday titles when the investigation started. In Italy, similar episodes happened with Presidente Mattarella and 2018 elections.
Excuse me, can you go to the question?
Yes.
And can you speak up a little bit?
Yes,
So
but with any conclusion. So, how can we fight all this fake news created by the fake news inventors?
So you're giving responsibility to the traditional media for fake news spreading?
No, I only think that who invented the fake news are the first people who give them since years. But now, at least we have some methods to understand if they are real or not. Because like in 20th century, people could only listen to TV or read journal or read newspaper.
I think you can try to give
an
answer.
I don't know if I got every part of your
Because
statement before the question finally came. So what can we do? I mean, I can also speak from, I know it's biased as well, but I can speak from a perspective of the media organization I work for, and it's the public service media organization. So what we're trying to do is tell the truth as good as we can. I mean, I can't get into a debate now about what the truth is because it's arbitrary. You can have a discussion that would still be ongoing on Monday morning. But that's what we're trying to to be as accurate, as fair, as balanced as possible and tell the truth. And of course, we get it wrong as well. Everybody gets it wrong. We're all human. But then if we do get it wrong, if anybody gets it wrong who's working in journalism, who's sort of taken the profession serious, they should also stand up to it and correct it and not wipe it under the table, but stand up for it, do a correction, say, hey, here we got it wrong. That's why we got it wrong. And this is what we have. Now, on your question, on the point that you made, where I don't use the word news. It's called misinformation or whatever, lies, and there's so much variety of what you call news, misinformation. Some is satire, some is deliberately misleading, some is propaganda, some is clickbaiting. There's so much out there. So first of all, it's important, what is it, and who are the drivers behind it, and what are their motivations and intentions. Some people, false information was used for decades in warfare, in propaganda, so there's specific motivations for doing that. Now we've seen lots of cases where people are making quite a lot of money by spreading misinformation. We've seen that in the run-up to the elections when the famous Macedonian village of, I think it was Veleš it's called, where people were earning tens of thousands of euros by spreading false information on which people were clicking, which was then being ranked high, and so lots of advertising. So it's a very, very wide topic, and I don't know if I answered your question, but I just gave some replies. I hope that, to some extent, satisfying.
What I could say is that educating young people is the best way to keep media accountable, and this is the way we are focusing on this issue. I thank you all for your attention. I hope you will have a good stay here in Perugia, and thank you.